Welcome back to the Daily Dose. My name is Robert, and once again here with Matthew. This has been a wonderful series talking about all things Parkinson's, from the rebranding of to the writing to the comedy to the presentation, aesthetic distance. We mentioned hallucinations and all the things we don't talk about, what I didn't say. I want to speak specifically about being a writer. And, you, as you have said, were not a writer before Parkinson's. You were, really fledged as an actor and a teacher of acting, a professor of acting, and you decided to write. So I think there's a lot of people out there that like the idea of writing, but don't do it. What do you feel now about your writing as you're developing? And what would you say to others who say they want to write something, but maybe don't know how, or might end up writing one of those surface level stories we talk about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, they need to take a class, as I have done. So, Robert, honestly, your class is dynamite, and if people want to tell their story, this is a great way to get it out. I remember my dad picking up a book that was meant for him to write about what he was leaving behind, his legacy, and it all came from prompts, right? It came from prompting him to write about this story or think of this story and write about it. And he had a good time, I think, being guided through the process. And so I think that's what you offer. And I think if anyone can have a guide through the process, because it's just overwhelming to sit down at a laptop and think, yeah, let me tell my story and all that would go into it. And so we need some help. We need some help. And we need some help not just to tell our stories, but to tell them well and in a way that's going to engage other people and reach an audience. So I think those things come together when we have help.
Yeah. You mentioned engaging. I know I tease it at one point in the class. I talk about so what stories, which leave the audience in exactly that place of who cares. And I think I mentioned to you a woman I met with Parkinson's down at the All In Austin, who was a lawyer, very learned. She was a judge, even, I think. And we got into a little bit of a back and forth because she was like, stories? No, no, no. We don't need stories. We need numbers to move people. We need more facts, this, that, and the other. And she was really pretty strongly against the idea of stories. And so, I'm not saying I swayed her ultimately to my side, and I wasn't even trying to do that necessarily, just to say, hey, consider that maybe numbers and stories can go together, instead of, because my takeaway from listening to her was that what she had heard was people telling the either poor me story that she felt nobody wants to hear, or the frankly boring story that doesn't have any stakes. And you and I know enough about storytelling to know, again, if you're not, that this is where the guide comes in. And not just me, by the way. I'm pulling from Joseph Campbell, who's pulling from 10,000 years of storytelling. And I'm pulling from directly from great films, in our case, Shawshank Redemption. To me, I'm not working that hard. I'm working hard to listen to you all. It's like I'm going to present the thing, and then I have to listen. What do you see and feel, and pull it? That's my job, is to
Mhm.
help pull out of you the things
Mhm.
you see and feel, because that distance between oneself and the screen, that's where the story lies. And a lot of people see that as a one-way interaction right now. And what I'm trying to say is there's another mode going back available should you wish to take it.
Yeah. The intersection of the arts and science is just unexplored territory. And it's too bad because I think, when I when I think about someone with Parkinson's having ED, as we just talked about, and then I think about 70% of the men who have Parkinson's battling with ED, that makes a tremendous difference. But that statistic doesn't mean a lot unless people are telling their stories about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, what if it's 70% having it? Where are those stories?
yeah.
Because guess what? Those stories are, filled with emotions that are tangible, because the identity of having ED is, I'm guessing, humiliating, is infuriating, is all of these things that are human, whether it's ED or anything else. To feel those things, that's where we become, what if we feel less than? What if we feel worthless? Because of that. And by the way, we wouldn't just feel that about ED. We might feel that about finances, or,
Yeah.
a job, or, anything else. But when we start to get,
And the other symptoms, hallucinations. If I have a hallucination, I'm going to think I'm crazy. I think
yeah.
I'm losing my mind. Like put me in a home. I'm imagining things,
So
right?
here is the master of horror and the guy I lean on so much, Stephen King, of course, author of Shawshank too. His greatest fear is losing his mind. That he stated that unequivocally. That is his greatest fear. And if a guy who lives and breathes this stuff knows it pretty damn well is speaking to that, again, why are we not talking more about what that looks and feels like? Well, I mean, scientifically, I know we're not because we can't quantify it. This is back to the numbers argument.
Yeah.
It's there's not a measure or scale right now to measure emotions in a quantifiable way. Because they are qualitative, they're thought of as squishy or less than, or soft science, pseudoscience, even pop science. I got all sorts of nicknames going through my PhD, which is still a PhD.
My
But yeah,
experience was told the exact opposite. The exact opposite. Stories stick with you. They make an emotional and physical impression on you. You know, I used to work in a church context, and the pastor would give the sermon, but we would do a sketch, like a little drama, back in the day. And people would always come up after the service and talk about the sketch, the drama, right? Because it impacted them here, not here. And they wouldn't remember all the points of the pastor's sermon, but they would remember this emotional feeling they got from hearing a story played out on stage.
it's the sneaky way into the head is through the heart, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the reason why we sat around fires. And by the way, when we did that as back to cave people, passing on traditions and stories, they weren't just so that we could feel good and entertain each other. It was so that we could survive. Stories are that important. We're that hardwired to feel and therefore retain, and therefore there is the value in telling them well.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
well, I can't thank you enough for spending time here today, my friend.
Yeah,
And
thank you. It was fun.
I'm looking forward to what's next. I really want to hear more about your stand up when you get more of it on stage, when we can see it. I will, of course, link people to your play so they can continue to access it. It's wonderful. And then as the screenplay develops, we'll together be walking that one out there to let people know because we're nearing the end of the class journey, but now we'll get into the rewrite, and we know that's where the real work is done. So,
Absolutely.
Matthew,
Thank
have
you,
a
Robert.
great day, and
Appreciate it.
thanks so much for joining us on the dose.
Thank you.